Move like Mycorrhizae. Some suggestions for Praxis. Part 2. Originally presented during the Anarcata Black August Freedom School, August 30th, 2020. Collective Work Unit, Ujamaa. When it comes to certain skills and objects, a degree of focus and specialization ends up unfolding in order to effectively produce, source, and provide specific supplies and particular services in or for a network of Anarcata associations. This is a unit who concentrates around producing or providing for direct use or need, rather than for sale or to acquire currency, and to achieve a surplus for further distribution. From food to housing to paperwork to security to mobilization and more, these formations help their associations by seeking to provide for both their direct connections as well as the larger network and community, each along somewhat specialized lines. But these working units cannot monopolize themselves as the sole or primary point of contact or access to resources, skills, knowledge, supplies, services, etc. A unit also spreads leadership capacity around its specialized labor through proliferating the skills, knowledge, and resources to enable the appearance of other units. And they nurture the general growth of revolutionary consciousness and free initiative among the people through political education. As the name implies, Ujamaa, the units help us all with forming community around collective work, which is to say, nurturing our collective capacity to take up whatever work is being specialized in. This goes beyond just mutual aid and sharing of resources and immediate needs. It extends to larger projects in a way that's not isolated or atomized. Every unit also keeps track of their internal logistics around how much that unit can produce, what it needs as inputs for productions, and how much it can sustainably give to other formations and individuals. Those taking up leadership in this operation disseminate and decentralize the capacity to take up the collective work and rotate their leadership, especially among the most marginalized, rather than remaining as permanent actors in this regard. Normally, Ujamaa often gets depoliticized and used in liberal ways, but for Anarcatas it is applied to a work unit to make sure that the skills, knowledge, logistical understanding, resources, and revolutionary consciousness are always being proliferated in our community. This can occur in different work units or cells. For example, there's a group of folks who specialize in acquiring seeds, storing them, disseminating the seeds, and growing food from them. They go around to different individuals and formations in the network to help folks do so as well, while also teaching one another what's needed to grow and store seeds and distribute seeds effectively. Another unit is making masks with a set of 3D printers as their specialty, storing some, disseminating the rest, while working to proliferate tools, knowledge, skills, resources, etc. necessary for that kind of work, or expand access to it to all, so that folk have capacity to also fulfill the same operation for themselves. Unity Contingent, Umoja. Across the network, a way to coordinate across different subsistence, distribution, and production capacities may unfold. These are communication and logistics spaces, entities, made up of membership from interlinked catalyst groups, collectives, pods, units, and other formations and individuals in a network of Anarcatas. They actively kick and keep track of asks for support and resources across the network. They harness the community power to fill in gaps wherever they might show up, Contingent spread leadership capacity around maintenance of our network of associations by proliferating skills, knowledge, resources to enable the appearance of other contingents. Through political education, contingents nurture the general growth of revolutionary consciousness and free initiative among the people. As the name might imply, umoja, contingents, pushes toward unity by providing support as middle person between formations who don't have the supplies or services they need, or who don't have the direct connections to suppliers needed so they can acquire said supplies and services. They help us harness community attention to where there are logistical gaps in a network. Then they help with providing or linking to direct labor, skills, knowledge, and resources to form new formations that address consistently unmet needs. Any leaders in this capacity spread the skills, knowledge, and resources needed so that others can step into these operations and or develop other contingents. Cooperative Hub, Ujamaa. Anarchadas take over physical spaces for use by a network of associations and by community. These get called hubs. The Cooperative Hub reclaims space to form community around commons. These will run gardens, develop open access kitchens. The Cooperative Hub extends to the takeover of factories or equipment, means of production. Hubs are a way to open up access spaces and equipment to catalyze new units and other formations popping up and help communities meet their own needs. Hubs also work to spread leadership capacity around seizing and developing cooperative hubs. They proliferate skill, knowledge, and resources to enable the appearance of other hubs. Through political education, they nurture the general growth of revolutionary consciousness and free initiative among the people. As the name implies, Ujamaa, it is about harnessing our cooperative economic means on a larger scale than just mutual aid or collective work. For context, Ujamaa is derived from the Swahili term for familyhood. Ujamaa has come to mean a form of collective or cooperative economics, though many know it as a more abstract principle via Kwanzaa, one that is often misinterpreted to support Black entrepreneurism and capitalists. Ujamaa, as historically practiced, has been a concretely socialist concept and economic practice. It refers to a concept within the Pan-Africanist tradition of socialism, which espouses collective ownership and benefit, and work to meet the needs of the people, rather than capitalist individual ownership, shareholder ownership, wage labor, and work to accumulate personal or organizational profit and currency, as well as the cooperative and communal enterprises set up in line with this concept. The term came to prominence under Julius Nyerere in Tanzania. Nyerere had seen how capitalism had impoverished the people of his nation and destroyed much of their traditional collective economic structures. To Nyerere, it was inherently African to practice collective economy, tied to a pre-colonial and uniquely African idea of personhood and community, and the communal village economy. In his eyes, liberation for African people should seek to eschew the Western systems of the market and capitalism. Ujamaa meant the nation of Tanzania creating a socialist collective economy more in line with their pre-colonial being, based on collectively owned, democratically managed agricultural collectives, working to meet the needs of the people rather than lining the pockets of owners. It meant Tanzanians coming together to form collective enterprise, not only within the marketplace, but also enterprises which would avoid the market and commodity exchange altogether, producing and operating to directly meet the hunger and educational needs of the young nation, free of normal monetary compensation. To apply Ujamaa to our context today, we must seek to establish common means of production, from mere open physical spaces to agricultural plots to factories. Ujamaa means establishing these, managing them in a collective and democratic manner in order to serve the community, and making these and/or their fruits of their use freely available to the community. Thinking back again to Kwame Nkrumah in African Socialism Revisited, we want to remind against seeing cooperative hubs in an idealist light. Nkrumah has important critiques to bring to our assessment of how concepts like Ujamaa have been used in African Revolution, namely this, quote, "The defeat of colonialism and even neocolonialism will not result in the automatic disappearance of the imported patterns of thought and social organization. For those patterns have taken root and are in varying degree sociological features of our contemporary society. Nor will a simple return to the communalistic society of ancient Africa offer a solution either. To advocate a return, as it were, to the rock from which we were hewn is a charming thought, but we are faced with contemporary problems, which have arisen from political subjugation, economic exploitation, educational and social backwardness, increases in population, familiarity with the methods and products of industrialization, modern agricultural techniques. These, as well as a host of other complexities, can be resolved by no mere communalistic society, however sophisticated, and anyone who so advocates must be caught in insoluble dilemmas of the most excruciating kind." End quote. These are wide-ranging questions that we cannot provide complete answers to here, but that we suggest anarchadas keep in mind for long term, thinking about how to creatively address them while still standing in our principles. Maroon Hub, cumbé. Anarchadas take over spaces to establish safe houses and squats and underground railroad kind of things that are hidden and low-key. These maroon hubs are there to harness communities around meeting the safety and defense and housing needs for the most marginal, especially victims of gender or domestic violence, undocumented folk, trans folk. These hubs involve storing food, medicine, weapons, etc., as well as maintenance and security. Maroon hubs also spread leadership capacity around seizing and developing these hubs and proliferating skill, knowledge, and resources to enable the appearance of other maroon hubs. While these formations are underground, it is their above-ground associations who will, through political education, nurture the general growth of revolutionary consciousness and free initiative among the people. As their name implies, cumbé, these reclaimed spaces serve to form community around settings of flight or refusal for the most vulnerable. For context, cumbé derives from the Manding for a high up and out of the way hill or place. The word comes from the Afro-Venezuelan tradition of marronage. Venezuelan Africans did not make up the majority of their nations and could not organize free black communities in the way that other African peoples had. Thus, many of them turned to the cumbé, a form of marronage in which they would reside in high hills, sheltering from slavery, colonialism, and anti-blackness. These cumbés existed within networks of connected cumbés and routes for trade, travel, and raiding. The economy of the cumbé, like many maroon economies, was communal and socialistic, based on collective agriculture and on more capable and prepared members of the community going out into the anti-black world to trade contraband or agricultural goods, conduct raids and recruitment in order to free other Africans, and steal resources held by colonizers so that they could provide for the less capable or more marginalized members of their community and bring forms of wealth and sustenance denied them into the cumbé. They were highly secretive and remained in hiding until liberation, in which cumbés and leaders from the cumbés played a major military role. Taking from the lessons of the cumbé, we must seek to build similar covert and network spaces of refuge for the most marginalized in our community, where they can have personal and political autonomy and the resources they need. And like those Maroons of the cumbé who journeyed on the trade routes and raiding routes, those of us who are in a position to must do what we can to provision for these refugees and siphon resources from the larger anti-black world into them. Grapevine. The grapevine is the rumor mill. As Patricia A. Turner points out, rumor has an important place in Black history for how our community helps us understand our oppression, even if the information is inaccurate. For anarchadas, the grapevine is more than just about passing information you heard. The grapevine is an experience of constant information sharing in Black culture that is communal. Anarchadas make use of the grapevine as a concept to describe revolutionary communication infrastructure that is not formally recognized or easily traceable. The Underground Railroad had code words within Negro spirituals to send messages. We see this as the grapevine. There are other forms of code, whether spoken, sung, written, or communicated in a sign language, that Black anarchic radicals use. When the DAP was developed as a form of solidarity, we say that is the grapevine. When street cats wear flags or throw up a set, we say that's the grapevine. Communication along the grapevine can also take the shape of traditional stories, our ancestors used to say, or proverbs. We fight for the fungus that is the fungible, we move like mycorrhizae, or ritual and chants. We pour one out for all the wild things man can't house, depending on your needs and context. Finally, the grapevine also includes social media, such as all the secret ways people discuss racism to keep from getting banned on Facebook, or all the cultural references through memes and GIFs that only Black people truly understand. The virtual grapevine is also about all the encrypted ways to chat and encode information that you want to keep hidden from our enemies. The knowledge accrued in the grapevine infrastructure is internal to Black anarchic radicals, and its spread must happen carefully. Concentric circles. Concentricity. Concentricity is a personalized guidepost for managing your associations. Concentricity helps you map out what your associations entail. Concentricity helps you map out how underground your associations may or may not be. Concentricity helps you map who you give access to what information about you. Concentricity helps you determine how removed or proximal certain formations and individuals are going to be to you or to specific formations and individuals. Concentricity helps you figure out what spheres of activation you and your associations should be rolling in and at what level, above ground or underground, for each sphere. Concentricity relies on principles of free initiative, free association, and the unlocking of individuals as a catalyzing agent of radical change. The various formations and individuals in a network do not have to roll in all the types of concentric circles below, but they should use concentricity to manage how they address the spheres of activity most pressing for them. Anarchatas will pull this off in a way that is strategic and vigilant, but still flexible, and in a way that guards the lane against oppression, abuse, and manipulation, especially of the most marginal. There are 5 features to concentricity. Central node / active agent. This is predicated on your individual actions. You, as the central node, are the site of pure agency as well as accountability to your community and any formations or individuals you commit to. The viability or sustainability of your associations depends on the capacity you decide on. As the active agent, you possess the most information about your motivations, spoons, goals, and details of your personal strategy. All modes of revolutionary activity are available to you, but take precautions not to endanger community and your collaborators. It is not advised that you engage in above ground and underground activity at once, because it can put your SIBs, even the whole network, in danger. Inner circle or inner circles. As the central node, you designate your inner circle, or perhaps multiple inner circles. Inner circles have the highest access to levels of personal information about the central node and each other, and also to sensitive information about revolutionary operations. If you have multiple cells, they will overlap with you, which is another reason why it is not advised for the central node to engage in both above ground and underground activity. Inner circles require the highest level of personal trust, and we recommend a limit of 7 active collaborators for each central node. Inner circles can be formations, but they don't have to be. Communication about sensitive topics should happen in secure settings. If in person, strive to minimize the likelihood of eavesdropping. Turn off the phone, communicate in low tones or in codes or signing. Cover your mouth to keep your lips from being read. And if online, make use of technology that is known to guard against infiltration, that is encrypted, which doesn't share or track information to the feds or other risks. Circle of familiars. Beyond the inner circle, there is a circle of familiars comprised largely of individuals, collectives, or organizations who, due to geography, their area of focus, practicality, or other reasons, are not in your inner circle, but have been determined to be relatively trustworthy by you or by the members of one's inner circle, and can be relied upon to a greater or lesser extent to assist in the work of liberation through the principle of mutual aid. Members of one's inner circle are often drawn from the circle of familiars as trust is gradually built up and a relationship is established. For those operating above ground, the circle of familiars may have access to an unlimited amount of personal information about the central node and the workings of the inner circle. If you are trans or disabled, it is possible that any cis or abled accomplices that you trust are still held in the circle of familiars. The circle of familiars can be called upon to provide support at public actions or demonstrations, to help with training you or your community in hands-on skills or self-defense, to assist with fundraising through promotion or the creation of art and copying or translating texts, sharing tutorials and other resources, developing theory, etc. It is possible someone's circle of familiars is a formation they are part of, but it doesn't have to be, as there are unaffiliated organizers who roll with a circle of familiars. Communication online and offline does not have to be as guarded, although this one should still be quite cautious. Active periphery. Beyond the circle of familiars is the next circle of removal, the active periphery. This large circle is a very mixed bag, which, while a hotbed of energy and a point of radicalization, may also contain closet reactionaries, secret enemies, liberals, and radlibs. The level of personal information and operational knowledge shared in whatever sphere of activity you address here should be little to none. Beginner-level political education, mutual aid, fundraising, mass mobilizing such as rallies and marches and vigils, calls to action, phone zaps, and broad-based introductory networking is the focus here. As trust is built up on an individual level with an individual or collective on the active periphery, they may eventually be moved into your circle of familiars. It is not advisable to admit anyone from the active periphery directly into your inner circle without a period of time gaining trust in the circle of familiars. Those who operate underground will probably not work or communicate directly with the active periphery at all. The active periphery is suited best to front-facing, low-risk, above-ground engagement. Here is where one might make momentary coalitions or engage in mass work that uses partial demands. Communication is way more open, so that includes speaking out or using social media, although one should still be somewhat cautious. Passive periphery. Beyond the active periphery lies the passive periphery. The passive periphery is the world or the public at large. This is a multiracial, multi-tendency field of theoretically infinite size and radical potential, but also the highest threat level where operational security is concerned. The level of contact and sensitive information shared in the spheres of activity that you address here should be none. Introductory level political education, in the form of articles or zines or memes, dissemination of propaganda, consciousness raising, online community building, mutual aid networks, fundraising, public kickbacks in the community, front-facing public actions or demonstrations can work well here. Individuals and collectives can move from the passive periphery to the active periphery in the early stages of relationship building. Communication is at its most wide-ranging here. Spheres of activity. Spheres of activity are also known as spheres of activation. They are sites of struggle. Police brutality is often one of the first spheres of activity Black people get politically activated in. Prisoners' battles, education battles, housing battles, food justice battles, reproductive autonomy battles, immigration battles, environmental justice battles, disability rights battles, trans rights battles are all potential spheres of activity. Each sphere can be approached in an underground fashion or an above-ground fashion. Each sphere can be addressed through one or more of the concentric circle types. Viable networks of freely associating anarchadas activate Black anarchic radical activity in multiple spheres through a diversity of concentric circle types. This does not mean every formation or unaffiliated partner in the network is rolling out radical shit in the same sphere. Example, everyone building around food justice. This also does not mean every formation or unaffiliated partner in the network is addressing the various spheres with the same type or number of concentric circles. Example, everyone rolling shit out at the passive periphery. Being coordinated and vigilant, and being truly intersectional or margin centering, when you address these spheres of activity, is tantamount to effectively building a movement along the anarchada frequency. Warnings. 1. Anarchadas should have zero tolerance policy for known or outed abusers, and any accountability or healing process requires first the disassociation of these actors and then putting resources, support, labor, and focus given to the victim survivor and secondarily impacted people, such as other survivors, folk in proximity who are groomed into not noticing the abusive or manipulative patterns. The abuser's process is deprioritized, and any conversation on re-entry is not held unless that is the consensus based on the needs of the survivors, the secondarily impacted people, and the community. 2. Anarchadas should not work with cops, military, and folk that are employed in institutions that warehouse and abuse disabled folk. People who are formerly in these institutions must be approached with caution. Be vigilant about vetting to check for who could be using skills learned from what they claim is their former job with the state and carceral institutions to further violate the most vulnerable. 3. Anarchadas should keep landlords and employers or bosses at the passive periphery. Collaborating with them is not a viable sphere of activation because from a material standpoint, rent is theft and a wage is exploitative. Not many Black people hold power in these ways, and the few who do must understand that their material investment in these positions is part of the capitalist colonial project. Their interests are more often than not self-serving or liberal, although some anarchadas have had rare, momentary partnerships with certain businesses, like laundromats or coffee shops, from which to activate shit in the passive periphery. 4. Anarchadas should keep folk who are working for the academy or universities or the nonprofit industrial complex at the active periphery. While there are working class and underclass people in these positions, the institutions they work for pose serious contradictions to contemporary struggle. These folks should not be the primary focus, presence, or starting place for our movement building, and depending on the institution, some should be avoided if their organization or school has a role or is complicit in the active violence against the most marginal. 5. Anarchadas should approach ministers and clergy with caution after the active periphery. If they are a rich or abusive person, they should not even be considered at all. Anarchada is not an anti-religious or anti-spiritual trajectory. Plenty of Black anarchic radicals are religious or spiritual, and many Black anarchic radicals are atheist or agnostic or disbelievers. The issue is, most formal religious institutions require that the primary accountability is to building the religion, separate from building a revolution to challenge the ruling authorities and implement alternative structures for the oppressed. This contradiction becomes exclusionary and a co-option of radical energy. 6. Anarchadas should deprioritize the leadership and visibility of anyone who already has clout or renown, and be adamant about preventing clout chasers and bag chasers from overtaking revolutionary movements. Cults of personality and opportunism must be studied, called out, and closed out of anarchada trajectories. Revolution is the conscious expression of unconscious strivings in the masses and margins, not the brilliance of one person's mind, brand, resume, or persona. 7. Anarchadas do not allow cis men to associate in a network as unaffiliated individuals. Due to the history of cis male irresponsibility and violence, it is only through membership in a formation that has clear accountability processes and consistent political education around gender that cis men can roll in a network. Any cis men moving through the anarchata trajectory in this way must operate an ascetic level of rigor to ensure they don't even give the appearance of cis heteropatriarchal violence. Cis men are deprioritized as leaders in the anarchata turn and are encouraged to put time, attention, and energy into helping the free initiative, safety, and leadership capacity of Black women and other mages to flourish. 8. Anarchatas deprioritize and discourage the leadership and visibility of light-skinned Black folk and Black folk racialized as mixed or ambiguous. Any such individuals should prioritize supporting and encouraging the free initiative and leadership capacity of darker-skinned Black individuals who are impacted the most by anti-Black colorism and its material effects. 9. Anarchatas prioritize building revolution with and for Black people because we believe the horizon of the contemporary struggle for planetary liberation is Pan-African in character. At the same time, there are considerable third world influences within Anarchata that make for potentially principled partnership with other colonized people. For Black folk who know they are isolated in regions with non-Black folk of color, the emphasis should be on supporting Pan-African liberation struggles and the radical activity and free initiative of Black people. Black anarchic radicalism is not to be tokenized for the liberation of non-Black community formations. 10. Anarchata stands against ageism and maintains an intergenerational orientation. Elders are not to be erased or treated like mammies, and youth are not to be silenced, exploited, or preyed upon. Intergenerationality builds a revolutionary movement through allowing for a culture of learning across time periods, and helps us stand in a living legacy of Black anarchic radicalism. 11. Anarchata does not base comradeship on family and friend as the only relational model. Radical communities should involve study, solidarity, struggle, mutuality, much love, dedication, accountability, consent, boundaries, and trust. But family and friendship have been too warped by colonialism, rape culture, and capitalism to allow for these elements if left unexamined. Unfair, often ableist and trans-misogynoirist expectations over people's emotional capacities and behavior traits get brought into movements when comradeship is assumed to be based off friendship and family. These models cannot sustainably or fairly be applied to all radical partnerships, collaborations, and associations. Everyone has relational needs, but we should set healthy boundaries to keep from developing toxic movement cultures and spaces rife with trauma bonding. 12. Anarchatas do not believe politicians, the political apparatus, and government structure are the necessary site of social change for our people. Taking cues from Modibo Kadali, we understand that as the moonlight is a response to the sunlight, state policy is always a response to mass activity from below. Historically, it has been assumed that this process implies there can be shared alignment between the governed and the governing bodies. Revolutionary movements have used demands to the state as a sphere of activation. Anti-colonial and socialist experiments under a state paradigm do exist because of this history. And since Anarchatas affirm self-determination overall, we affirm these projects as ongoing sites of struggle, not advocating for their disruption in the way white anarchists do. Anarchatas do, however, understand that the state is a European invention formed on a transition from religious/feudal world to a secular/capitalist world that involved gendered violence, ableism, and the anti-black production of colonial man as the pinnacle of human subjecthood under the state. Through the nation-state formula and the notion of sovereignty, which was formulated to stabilize conflicts between Western nations that arose because of imperial conflict, the modern government apparatus takes life in class struggle along the color line, or the division between colonizer and colonized nations. To this day, most states are neocolonial and outright imperial, and so their alignment is with capitalist interests for the West, not the interests of the most marginal. Anarchadas stand in making sure all power gets to all the people first, and not their proxies. Suggested resources: African Anarchism and Communalism. Anarchada 101, AID Feedback Loop. Black Anarchism, a Reader. African Anarchism, a History of a Movement. Anarchada, a Statement. Kickbacks, Ancestors, and Wildcats, the Anarchada Turn. Anarcho-Pantherista. Anarchism and the Black Revolution. Message to the Black Movement. African Socialism Revisited. Class Struggle in Africa.